So there's a deep irony and a huge debate to something as simple as understanding. And this is the case in psychology, in neuroscience, in physics, mathematics, and across the board, like even in philosophy, obviously dating back for thousands of years. And this has become incredibly important when it comes to consciousness and AI and these debates and whatnot, but also to ourselves and what it means to be us. And this debate really started picking up in the 90s when Roger Penrose wrote Emperor's New Mind and started arguing for the possibility that our brains may not work in the way we think they do, in the algorithmic way that computer scientists expect them to do. And Carl Jung makes many of these same arguments in his work, which we can also talk about here in a second. So there's a lot of disagreement on this front, but also some really interesting alignment on what this means for us as humans and what this looks like for us as we navigate this world. So let's start in the Red Book by Carl Jung. This is his documentation of his entire journey into his own unconscious. And he documented this through his process of active imagination, which was basically like waking dreaming. And so for him, the spirit of the depths was essentially the wisdom of the unconscious. And in his dreams, it would reveal incredible insights to him. And so this is what it says here. It says, the spirit of the depths spoke to me and said, to understand a thing is a bridge and possibility of returning to the path. But to explain a matter is arbitrary and sometimes even murder. Have you counted the murderers among the scholars? And Carl Jung himself was a scholar. So first of all, what is that saying there? Obviously, that's pointing to something along the lines that the understanding itself maintains this bridge to return to the world of understanding. That understanding without explaining has a special quality to it. That there's something in the understanding itself that enables for, possibility to emerge. That this is a bridge towards further understanding. And that understanding is a different place than the place through which explaining emerges. And that's a really, really interesting insight, and one that we'll now follow up here with Roger Penrose. And so Penrose now, in Emperor's New Mind, which is a book on computability and a mathematical argument for what understanding and how the brain may work, and all of this, how it might actually be. And Penrose, in this chapter, is now beginning to argue that the brain may just resemble a non-computable way of understanding. And let's look at what it says. So it says that in here, right near the end of the book, it says, we must see the truth of a mathematical argument to be convinced of its validity. This seeing is the very essence of consciousness. So in this regard, seeing would be essentially the word of understanding. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But it must be present wherever we directly perceive mathematical truth. When we convince ourselves of the validity of Gödel's theorem, we not only see it, but by doing so, we reveal the very non-algorithmic nature of the seeing or understanding process itself. Oh, also, side note, I thought this was really funny. When I bought this book on Amazon, it came with this little newspaper cutout that someone in the 90s was using. And look at that. Oh, right here. Jurassic Park was reviewed, and it received a 4.5-star rating from Jeff Simons. Good work, man. Okay, so now that you're distracted by Jurassic Park, I think we can talk about the actual meaning of what Penrose is trying to say here, because obviously you can get lost in the mathematics of it all, and we don't want to get bored by the mathematics. But here's what he's trying to say. So what he was trying to prove is that algorithmically, you can make an algorithm that represents everything Josh will ever do mathematically can be generated, explained, or formulated by algorithm F. So this algorithm is something that represents the entire way in which Josh can mathematically use logic to understand anything, okay? And so that could plausibly be made in a world where everything is algorithmic and linear, just like computers are today. So then he says, okay, let's assume that's true. Okay, that's step 2. Now we have step 3. This is where Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theorem comes in. So now Kurt Gödel can say, well, if that is indeed Josh's complete total algorithm for his mathematical reasoning, then I can build a special mathematical statement for that algorithm. So Gödel can now say, well, how about this? This statement cannot be proven by algorithm F. So now this is statement G, or algorithm G, you may say, but statement G, statement Gödel. This statement cannot be proven by algorithm F. And so now how does Josh understand this algorithm, or this statement through his algorithm F? Well, Josh can see why it must be true. Why statement G has to be true? Well, because if F cannot be proven, if F cannot prove the statement, well, then it's failing to do what it should be able to do. But that would be a paradox. So we can understand the paradox here that Gödel is showing us. So Josh can see why it must be true, even though algorithm F can't actually prove that it is. Well, now that's quite the predicament for linear processing. So Roger Penrose can now say, well, therefore, Josh's mathematical understanding cannot be fully captured by algorithm F or any fixed algorithm. So then he makes the conclusions. Therefore, understanding can exceed the computation, and then therefore, the brain must implement some sort of non-algorithmic physical process for computing and understanding. So that's how we end up at a point where Penrose says, okay, this is a new mind. This is the emperor's new mind. And this is a world where now the world is non-algorithmic, and our brains are utilizing something that is akin to non-algorithmic processing. So then what does this mean for the nature of investigations into, all things human and understanding and the mind and consciousness? Well, this is why Roger Penrose went on to propose a theory of consciousness that involved quantum processes, because quantum processes are inherently non-algorithmic. They're inherently something that does not use a linear algorithm. It searches all possible paths at once, if you want to use Feynman's path integral in that terminology. But all of that to say is that this points to the fact that the brain is not algorithmic in some sense, and quantum provides the best explanation for how that could be plausible. And that's where the work that Jack and I have been doing comes into play here, on providing an alternative explanation for how quantum processes may be involved in the brain's organization, informational organization, and most importantly, our understanding and our conscious experience. So you can check out that in other videos.